This offseason has been one of the most transformative offseasons in Vikings franchise history. And we wanted to walk back because a lot has happened over the last couple months. Here are the top 10 offseason moves for the Vikings so far. Some of the moves they made and some of the moves they didn't make. So starting off at number 10, not hiring Jim Harbaugh. Now, we're fully in, man, just because of the hype, Harbaugh's success in the NFL with the Niners, and Michigan coming off his best season. Hey, they finally beat Ohio State. Woo, 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 woo. But like I was fully all in. It's like, who's got it better than us? Nobody. And Harbaugh can be motivating. He can be abrasive. He can do everything like that. But looking back now, yeah, the fact that the wires got crossed where it was obvious that Harbaugh thought that this was a coronation and the Vikings thought that this was an interview, Quasi and Harbaugh, and even Kevin O'Connell, they crossed paths with the Niners back in the day. Actually, no. O'Connell, no. But anyways, Quasi and Harbaugh, yes. But it just wasn't meant to be. It was just one of those spots where Harbaugh got on that plane, flew into TCO Performance Center Bar and Grill, thought that he was getting the job. And thinking about it, you know, the Vikings talking about the locker room culture, and players have not been afraid to throw Zimmer and Spielman and their culture under the bus. So continuing that with another hard ass, another player that does wear players down to the nub, I don't know. I don't know. And it was a short-term fix. Like Harbaugh up there in age as well. Was he going to be a guy that's going to be here for 10, 15 years like O'Connell could be? Probably not. So it was a good no hire there. Number 9, top 10 offseason move for the Vikings. Extending Kirk Cousins. I understand this is controversial. Fully understand that. But the extension freed up some cap space this year. And also Kevin O'Connell and quasi adofo-mensah, they tied their short-term future to Kirk Cousins. Kirk is going to be the quarterback of the Vikings over the next 2 years. That just is what it is with that one-year extension. So they've hitched their wagons to him. Like, they fully understand that if this thing goes sideways, if this thing goes wonky, they may never have another shot again. So they're putting their one shot, do not miss your chance to blow, on Kirk Cousins. Right, because they understand that there is no better option, and Kirk Cousins, this is the ultimate mama, I can change him spot. It was like, hey, Kirk Cousins had some nice moments under the Kubi eyes, but Kevin O'Connell, who's worked with Kirk Cousins before, just won a Super Bowl with a similar quarterback in Matthew Stafford, just like, hey, we can do this. So it does make sense where you have some short-term stability as well as he freed up some cap space this year. Next up, number 8 move of the offseason for the Vikings. Not re-signing Anthony Barr. Now, Anthony Barr, respect. Number 9 overall pick in 2014. He had his moment. A 4-time Pro Bowler, team captain for the Vikings. I think that he was underappreciated at times, and he filled a very specific niche role in the Zimmer defense. But changing defensive schemes, Anthony Barr hasn't been healthy for the last couple seasons, and it just sort of is what it is. Like, he wasn't going to have a carved out spot in this defense. Like, was he going to play off ball inside linebacker? Was he going to play on the edge? I don't really know. Given his age, it was time to turn the page. And it is tough breaking up Barr and Kendricks, who've been such a great duo for the Vikings, as well as going back to UCLA. But it was just time to move on. It was just time to close that chapter and move on from number 55. Next up, number 7 offseason move for the Vikings, re-signing Patrick Peterson. So even though we said moving on from an older veteran like Barr and then bringing on Patrick Peterson last year and then re-signing him, this one actually makes sense because the Vikings cornerback room is still young, and Patrick Peterson has been a phenomenal leader, not only for the cornerbacks, but for the defense as a whole. I think that he has really stepped into the power vacuum. I think that it will be his team in year 2, his defense, as they change over to Ed Donatel. And Peterson, I mean, before he had that hamstring injury last year, Patrick Peterson was playing good. Like, we're not talking about cornerback 1 locking down wide receivers 1s like in 2011, 2012. Like, he ain't that Patrick Peterson anymore, but a crafty veteran who's forgotten more about route running than most cornerbacks will ever know in their entire lifetime. He contributed well. I think that P-Square does still have a role to play, even though the Vikings dancers really stepping up. They brought in a Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth Jr. Yeah, but P-Square is still going to be that guy. Next up, move number 6, top 10 Vikings offseason moves. Firing Zimmer and Spielman, right? So I like Zimmer coming in. He was exactly the kick in the pants that the Vikings needed after the Leslie Frazier era. Peaked in 2017. Should have ripped off that Super Bowl one time. Home Super Bowl on the line. But, you know, this was a couple years too late. situation, and the relationship between Zimmer and Spielman reportedly deteriorated. They weren't on speaking terms, according to numerous sources, notably Deion Sanders, who got that information straight from Mike Zimmer. So it doesn't take a genius to put those two dots together. But yeah, in terms of like a toxic workplace, that term gets bandied about a lot, but you could tell that the players were not having fun. As soon as they got punched in the mouth in the game, they folded because, it's hard to play for an organization where you don't feel like showing up to work. You just don't. Like, even though it'd be like, well, they're multi-million-dollar athletes. Like, hey, if you don't like showing up to your job, it's just not going to be the same. And that's why I was on board with potentially firing Zimmer and letting Spielman have another crack at a head coach. But after all that other information came out, it was clear that they had to clean the decks, right? So everyone is out. Quasi and Kevin O'Connell are in. So we move on with life. Next up, number 5. Also, I like that Quasi traded down 17,000 times in the draft as an homage to Rick Spielman. Next up, number 5, offseason move for the Vikings. Trading down, drafting Lewis Cine. Yeah, the aforementioned Quasi trading down. Now, Quasi had some huevos, had some balls of steel, man. Trading down in division twice with the Lions when they picked up Jameson Williams at 12, trading down with the greasy grimy Green Bay Packers when they came up in the second round to get Christian Watson. But Lewis Cine is that guy. Now, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to second guess Quasi. They've already happened. It's like, oh, you could have had Kyle Hamilton if you wanted a safety versus Lewis Cine. But I think Lewis Cine is going to bring energy, is going to be that straw that stirs the drink on the back end of that defense. You got Hitman and Murder Scene together. And people have got, all right, so I like the nickname Murder Scene for Lewis Cine, but people are like, oh, that has violent connotations. We've literally been calling him Harry the Hitman for years. Like, what do you think hitmen do? Like, murder for money. Like, Hitman isn't a DJ, man. Come on. Anyways, I digress. But Lewis Cine is going to be a bad dude. Plus, I love the draft capital that they scooped up, and they were able to maneuver. They picked up Andrew Booth Jr. trading up in the second round. So I think that the moves that Quasi put on in this draft, also mortgaging a future draft pick to move up on day 3 early to get a Caleb Evans, I think that the moves will make sense. I think that this draft will pan out, even though there were some question marks for sure, especially trading down 20 spots in division. It was a little rough, handing the Lions potentially the best wide receiver in this draft, but I think it will all work out in the end. Next up, number 4, offseason move for the Vikings, shifting to the 3-4 defense, where, the 4-3 had been very, very good to the Vikings during the Zimmer regime. Well, at least at the start of the Zimmer regime. Now, they hadn't had elements of the 3-4 since way back in the day, back when Buddy Ryan was a Vikings defensive line coach. But now, the personnel-wise, stacking up, bringing in Zadarius Smith, having Danielle Hunter stand up, and just getting after it, because the defensive line had been stacked with a bunch of dudes whose true position probably is going to be 5-tech. You look at Jumpin' James Lynch. You look at Armand for Watts. You look at the way that the Vikings just failed to stop the run at points last year. I think that a new attitude and a new course correction on this defense was in order. And I think that having new ideas has been refreshing for some of the veterans on defense. I think Ed Donatell does bring a nice energy to the defensive side of the ball. I think they'll certainly get after it. Plus, the talent is there. The Vikings were second in sacks last year, and that defense was booty. Go ahead. Next up, number 3 offseason move for the Vikings. Signing Zadarius, keeping Danielle. Yeah, speaking of defensive moves. So Zadarius Smith coming over across the river. Plus, by the way, bringing Mike Pettin over from, formerly Green Bay, last year's consulting with the Bears, as well as stealing Mike Smith, outside linebacker, pass rusher coach. I think that's one of the more underrated moves of the offseason, because Mike Smith was instrumental in getting Rashad Gary's head out of his ass last year, actually getting something out of him. So having Smitty come over and coaching up the outside linebackers, where Zadarius played in the defense for a number of years. If he can stay healthy, if that back is good to go, he can resume his pace as one of the most dominant edge rushers in the game. Remember, 2019, the last season that both of these guys were fully healthy, they were 1 and 2 in terms of pressures in the league. 1 and 2. All right, not Bosa, not the Watts, not Myles Garrett. We're talking about Zadarius Smith. We're talking about Danielle Hunter. So, again, knocking on all the wood. If we can get some health luck, we're going to be good to go. Also, Danielle Hunter, the Vikings could have easily traded Danielle this offseason. He had that $18 million rooster bonus coming in, but they kept him together, and they're going to be one of the best pass rushing duos in the National Football League in this new defense. Next up, offseason move number 2 for the Vikings. hiring Quasi over Ryan Poles. Now, Ryan Poles would have been the safe pick, right? So Ryan Poles, former offensive lineman, came up in the Chiefs organization from scout to Ultimately, he went to the crooked Chicago Bears. But you look at the move so far. It seems like the Bears. I don't know. I don't know if there's a mandate to completely implode this thing, like tear down and then rebuild. But I do not like what the Bears have done at all this offseason. They gave away Khalil Mack. They gave away Allen Robinson. And now they're probably going to get rid of Robert Quinn as well. And also, Justin Fields, like we said, he needs protection. He needs weapons. And they went backwards in both of those departments this offseason. And I don't know, like, when you hear Quasi talk, like, you hear a guy who should be running like a Fortune 100 company, right? And Ryan Poles, I don't know. Oh, yeah, we're going to dominate the division over the next couple of years. That sounds like me. That sounds like, hey, we're going to win a dozen Joe Bardys over the next 10 years. It sounds like a fan just like won the GM job. I don't know. I don't like Quasi. I love him as a leader. I like that he marches to the beat of his own drum. I like that he has his own strategy. He's not going to kowtow to public pressure. That's why he had the huevos to make some of those moves, man. So I love me some Quasi. That's something that's going to be compared to over the next couple of years because, Quasi and Poles were the final two candidates for the Vikings. Did Poles take the Chicago job because he knew that Quasi was going to get the Vikings job and he just wanted to settle? It's possible, man, because obviously the Vikings are a better situation right now and for the foreseeable future than the crooked Chicago Bears. Lastly, numero uno, hiring Kevin O'Connell, right? So all of the head coaching candidates who came in, whether it be Jim Harbaugh or Dan Quinn or DeMeco Ryans or whoever, but Kevin O'Connell, he is that guy. Like he fits that mold of the young offensive wunderkind, a guy that, hey, we've said before that the problem with a defensive-minded head coach is that once you get any semblance of quality in terms of offensive play caller, they'll be gone. They'll be poached to be a head coach somewhere else. So you'll constantly have turnover on that offensive side of the ball. But hey, if Kevin O'Connell is in place, you can have an Andy Reid type run where, hey, this is going to be the offense. We can work together. This is going to be a collaborative process with the quarterback, with the wide receivers, Justin Friggin Jefferson, and changing over this entire offense. Because, I mean, when's the last time we had an offensive genius and a guru? It certainly wasn't Brad Childress. Brian Billick, 98 Vikings. And that's what happened. Then he got poached and went to the Ravens and then won a Super Bowl with the greatest defense of all time and a horrible offense. I mean, that's gotta cheering him just a little bit. I mean, Brian Billick is not without ego, so that should just get him a little bit. But Kevin O'Connell helped construct the offense last year with Sean McVay that won the Super Bowl with a very similar quarterback to Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford. And guess what? Better weapons across the board here with the Vikings. So we are talking about a 98 Vikings. We're talking about a greatest show on turf. We were talking about Sharks with freaking laser beams type offense. And I'm excited for him. And the fact that O'Connell is young, he's 36 years old, and he's going to be here a long time. Plus, he sort of looks like a young Bud Grant. Take that, man. That's why that's numero uno offseason move for the Vikes. But that's it. Top 10 Vikings offseason moves. Let us know your thoughts. What's too high? What's too low? What should be on there? What shouldn't be on there? Anyways, let us know in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo. But until next time, Skol, production value.